Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and give it another minute or two, let everybody get settled into our webinar here. We are ready to go and ready to have a great conversation this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at in the US. I'll speak for myself because I'm in California. So we'll just hang out here for another minute or two and we'll get started. All right. Well, it is 10:02 on my clock. So let's go ahead and let's get started with our webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for our 2023 send-off webinar, talking about higher education. My name is Johan Moncada with Lead Squared. I'm one of our account representatives here, representing the US North American market. A little bit about myself. I've been in higher ed myself for about 15 years at different capacities in operations and admissions. And I am excited to be part of this webinar today, moderating it for the most part with our three panelists that we have here for our webinar. So a few things before I introduce everybody and we kind of get the ball rolling. For everybody that's attending the webinar today, you will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you need to adjust your volume, please make sure to check your settings on your Zoom devices. And we do want input. This is meant to be an interactive webinar, so we will have polls that will be popping up on the screen as we go through our conversation today. So definitely feel free to get involved, answer the poll questions, submit any comments in the chat, and we're more than happy to take the time today to be able to cover those things. Just make sure you're using that chat function. So that being said, let me go ahead and introduce our panelists here. So I will go ahead and go up first with David Babst, who is with Level Agency. David, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning to everybody on the webinar. My name is Dave Babst. I'm the Vice President of Agency Development and Strategic Partnerships at Level Agency and Becker Media. My job is really to help our fully dedicated staff of higher education marketers help schools grow in more meaningful ways by finding the right types of students and putting them in the appropriate programs. So we very much focus on identifying new opportunities for student growth, and we build the strategies and execute the strategies around the marketing that will help you achieve those ambitious growth goals that you have as an institution.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for being here with us today. We also have Mr. John Meyer with Complete You. John, if you can please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Johan, thank you. My name is John Meyer. I'm the CEO and founder of Complete You. We're a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania-based higher education enrollment services company. We help schools scale enrollment in three key areas: new student recruitment, current student retention, and stop-out student re-enrollment. We started the company with stop-out students and helping them finish their degree, hence the name Complete You, and we found that was fitting for the other populations as well. We have a really strong focus on the adult learner population. We also work with traditional students as well, but we're probably most known on the adult learner side of the house with our partners and both institutional-wide and business-wide. So thank you again for having me, and excited to share our story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And we also have a surprise panelist that was able to join us last minute. I'd like to introduce her, Cheryl. Cheryl's actually with Lead Squared. So Cheryl, if you can please introduce yourself to the webinar and a little about what you do, and we can keep going. And you're muted, Cheryl.
Mute. Thanks, Johan, for reminding me that I was muted. My name is Cheryl Beckman. I am the Senior Vice President for Education for Lead Squared. I've spent over 20 years in higher education, primarily on the technology side. So I worked for very small companies like SunGard Higher Education, which became Elucian, as well as Blackboard on the Transact, which is the student services side of Blackboard, and for Teradata, which was all about international inbound students and travel registry and study abroad. And now I'm here with Lead Squared. So thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Thank you for being able to join us, Cheryl. We appreciate you being here with us. So today's agenda, we are going to be talking about a few different things, as you can see: adapting to shifting student needs, maximizing marketing automation, streamlining student engagement and enrollment, career services and industry partnerships, crisis management and preparedness, what to look for in 2024. And then we will also be wrapping up our webinar with a Q&A session. To give everybody the opportunity to ask any questions you may have at the end of the webinar. But again, our chat is active. If you want to plug anything in the chat, we'll be able to get back to you as we are going through this webinar today. So let's go ahead and let's dive right in. But before we dive in, let's start with a poll question for all of our attendees here. So our first poll question is, how would you rate your institution's success in adapting programs to meet evolving needs and expectations of students in the past year? Excellent, good, average, or below average? So I'll go ahead and give everybody about 60 seconds if you want to go ahead and rate this here, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our first panel question. I feel like we need to have the Jeopardy clock going. Oh, there we go. All right. So the majority of you guys answered as good. 55% of our attendees rated as good, 9% as excellent, and 4% as average. So let's go ahead, and I think that's a good segue. That's a good question for us. So I guess for our panelists here, how do you guys think that educational institutions have successfully adapted their programs to the changing need and expectations of students over this past year?
I'll hop in. I think for our experiences, and we deal with every different kind of institution all over the country, I have seen schools move faster, be more nimble, be more fast in the last 18 months to 2 years. You can even go as back as almost 4 years when the pandemic started in early 2020. If you wanted to go back even November of 19, I guess, in senses that it may have started, but schools are being more fast and more nimble now than ever, and they know it. The shot clock, back to your Jeopardy reference, there is the hourglass is ticking on a lot of old processes, and you're seeing schools move quickly, and they're really digging in, and you're seeing a lot of good come from that. You're seeing the students really be put first. Not that they weren't first before for many institutions, but the hyper focus on retention now, that there's just not more students to go get, so let's just go get more students. You're seeing anytime there's a focus on retention, that means you're putting the students' needs first and understanding what those needs are, that they are not what a student's needs were 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. So from our perspective, it's been really fun and challenging, both from the schools and our perspective, but to see schools with limited staff go, we've got to figure this out. We got to figure it out fast. And I'm seeing them do that.
Oh, that sounds good.
John, I think you raised some great points around trends that I'm seeing too. I would just say that in general terms, the marketplace is much more competitive. Depending on the type of school and modality that we're talking about, there are less students available in the market, and that's bringing on increased levels of competition, and it's also leading to more institutions thinking about where they can find ways to identify new students, and in many ways that's leading them to the adult learner, whether that's with the for-profit or the traditional school type. So I agree with you. Schools are moving faster, but they're also playing a lot of catch up right now, and the game is changing on them. And the game is changing, I think, from a just from a sheer market demand perspective. And then, as you said earlier, alluded to earlier, the pandemic changed so many things when it comes to the expectation that a prospective student has with the relationship that they're going to have with an institution.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is the enrollment cliff that everyone's talking about. So we're talking about the impact of the pandemic, and that people had to change quickly to go online or do the other things that they didn't have the technology to do. But we have to look back 20 years to, 18 years back to 2007, 2008, 2009, where fewer babies were produced. So now we're hitting that, right? So there are a lot fewer students to go after. So the schools are in a situation where they have to become more competitive. And we're also in an environment where, we've been here for the last, probably 5+ years, where everything's about immediacy. And you have to be able to reach those students where they are, those prospective students, because if you're only relying on things like email, you're missing a lot of the population.
Yeah, and if I could piggyback off of that, I like that notion. You're seeing that in the vendor space. I'm now getting asked by schools, who else do you work with in our area on the front end enrollment side? And I think you're going to see more and more schools asking that question, because before there was enough students, to your point, Cheryl, right, and Dave, that there were enough students. So if the same company was helping the same 10 schools in the same area with new student recruitment, how do we know they're working hardest for us? Well, we've always had the right amount of students. And now that there's not the right amount of students and it's becoming more competitive, I'm seeing schools ask their vendors, who are you working with in the area? How do we know you're working hardest for us? What are the things that you're going to do uniquely for us, not this blanketed approach, right? What kind of high touch can you provide that's customized solution just for us and our institution and our students and our population? And that is, I don't want to say never, but it hasn't happened in the last 20 years that you're asking, who are you working with?
That's interesting. And I'd say part and parcel with that, John, I think increasingly schools are looking for increased levels of specialization with their partners. I think having a generalized approach, I think that's part of the problem that the OPMs are having, right? You go out and you say you do everything and we'll take care of it, and pat them on the back and say, don't worry about it. That doesn't really work anymore, right? And so what's happening is the competitive landscape, to John's point, is requiring a recalibration around how schools think about a partner. It's also demanding more from a partner today.
And brand awareness. Dave and I were just at the same conference out in Portland, Oregon last week, and I heard the word brand used more times in 3 days than I had maybe in the last 10 years of higher education. And I say that with a smile, because schools are embracing the idea of, let's triple down on us. Let's triple down on what we do best. Let's not be all things to all people. And that has been fun to see. Dave and I have a mutual friend, and they're a client of ours in Maine, Unity Environmental University. Unity used to be a Unity college with on campus only 600 students. And they said, and their Dr. Melachori said, how can we grow us into this future higher ed? And they tripled down, not doubled down, they tripled down on their brand of environmental learning and environmental programs, and went all online. And they now have 7,500 students, growing to 10,000 in the next probably 18 months to 2 years. That is what you can do. It'd be easy to say, we're in the middle of nowhere, Maine. We are struggling in this environment. We have the enrollment cliff coming. Every school can say that right now. What are you doing to win where you win best, and then grow that? Because not every school does that well. Go do what you do well.
Well, I think that that's an excellent point, because it's all about differentiation. You can't be everything to everyone, because once the student gets to campus, you want them to have the same experience on campus that they had during the recruiting process, right? So it's all about doing what you do well and using that as your marketing and your brand, right? Back to John, your point about hearing everything about brand, right? You were at UPSIA. Is that, I'm assuming that's where you were.
Yes.
So, and brand is really important because that's who you are as an institution. And if every single student was exactly the same, then everybody would have the same message. They're not. And so that's what you want to use to draw those students to your institution.
And their expectations are higher than ever now, which I also love seeing, that students and their parents and their caretakers, and you name whoever's attached to that process of making a major decision, which is higher education, whether it's a certificate, degree, you name it, it's a big decision. There's an investment there. And you're seeing students say, what level of customer service am I getting? Yes, I know what type of degree you're telling me I'm going to get, and I know what type of brand I'm going to get and what degree program I'm going to get. How are you going to help me get there, right? What kind of level of service am I getting for thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of investment? Not just, hey, work really hard and get a degree. We know that's already the expectation. How are you going to guide me to completion? And that's what I've seen students, because the price tag on higher education today are going, what's in it for me? What are you going to do for me? No different than any other customer service. You know, when you call Southwest Airlines on a $300 flight ticket, $400, and you have to sit there on hold for 45 minutes, you're upset. But now you're paying tuition of thousands of dollars and you sit on hold for 45 minutes, you're going, something's not right here.
Yeah, and these kids, in a lot of cases, learn through the pandemic. They, you know, that their expectation of a learning environment is not just them sitting in a classroom and having a professor speak at them, right? They want to understand, is a hybrid option going to be available to them? What does a virtual environment look like? Is there a way that they can learn on their own terms? And they want to be able to find that information when they're making a decision around what institution they're going to take their time, talent, and treasure to.
Yeah, I agree. And these are all great points, guys. You know, especially when you look around things like brand awareness, you know, I think a lot of schools out of the pandemic are really faced with, you know, I like to call it identity crisis, right? I speak with a lot of colleagues that I've had at the C level of different institutions, and it's, well, what is your brand all about? What does your brand bring, right? And how are you conveying it to sort of, I know you know it, but do your students know it? And how do they feel it, touch it, smell it, right? So all great points, guys. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, as we talk about brand awareness, right? And I know Cheryl touched on, you know, if you're just using regular email to reach out to your students, well, you're really not doing much. You're providing a disservice almost. So I think that's a good segue into our next question. You know, when we look at things like marketing automation tools, right? They're very instrumental personalizing and improving communication with students and student experience. Could you guys share with me what you've seen over this last year? When we look at marketing automations, how have you guys been able to leverage that to connect with more students or personalize the approach with students?
Dave, you want to take that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that so much of, at least in our world, you know, automation is essential, and there are features and benefits that various platforms really bring that enable you to bring a more customized experience to the prospective student that you're trying to engage with. And there are also certainly features and benefits that your staff is going to need in order to pull the dials that are going to allow you all to effectively employ those tactics, right? But so much of it really is about, in my simple view, is about bringing data together that can allow you to understand an audience, and then understanding what matters to that audience, defining the set of marketing objectives and tactics that you want to employ, and figuring out how technology can bring that to life, right? I think oftentimes where I've seen schools get tripped up a bit is when they think that the technology is going to be the end all solution, and that they're not thinking through what it is they're trying to solve for in a holistic way that involves both people and technology.
Yeah. I think what I would add to that is, when you think about what you hired your recruiters and your admission staff to do, is to have those personal interactions with the student, right? You want to have the best possible experience that you can give them so that they say, yeah, that's what it's going to be like when I come to XYZ. And if your people are doing integration work, or they're working on putting together an email campaign and it takes them 2 days to do it, they're using valuable time that they could be spending with a prospective student face to face. So automation should not be done for automation's sake. It should be done because it makes life easier for your staff and it makes the experience better for that prospective student. So let the system do the menial work that they get drugged down into, right? And let them have that great experience with that student that you really hired them to do. And so that's the key, I would say, is that whatever you're having the system do, have it take work off of your staff, not make more work for your staff. And then it allows them to communicate with a student in a way that they're used to communicating and what they've come to not just expect, but demand. I mean, back in the day, maybe, I think it was probably 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, there was a study that was done about how students select a university. And 93% of them said that one of the factors was the university's use of technology. And so that was a factor in them selecting the institution that they attended. So think about that, but always think about that technology makes it easier, not harder. So the easy button, there should be an easy button there because it's about immediacy these days.
Cheryl, you keep it up, we're going to bring you on our team. I'm just going to throw that out there now because you're saying a lot of the things that we talk about. What the first thing we say to a school is, we have a company, right? The reason we exist is to allow your team to do what they really were hired to do, right? Which is handhold a student, do the dance between registrar, business office, financial aid, admissions, whatever that dance is. There's a dance there that you have to have time to do and handhold a student. And our job is top of funnel, that we'll do the chasing, we'll do the initial outreach and schedule in the calendar meetings for your team. The reason I started an old school business, yes, we're a contact center at our heart. We do email, we do text, we do surveys over the phone. The reason I started a contact center, one, because Level Agency was already in the digital marketing space. I said there was no chance of competing against those guys. But the real reason was it was old school, and every piece of our data shows it works. I get asked all the time, are you going to tell me that Gen Z answers the phone? I said, of course they don't. But when you leave a voicemail and you text and you email and you're persistent, not going overboard, but you're consistent in your outreach and persistent, you're going to get voicemails back, you get calls back, you get text messages back. And it is showing that high touch, high engagement works. Human to human interaction is working for us, right? And the schools like it because they're going, you're an extension of us. And I'm not sitting here trying to sell it. What I'm trying to say is, if you're not doing live agent calls, you should be, right? The hard part for every school is, how do we scale 5,000 phone calls, right? If they didn't work, we'd be out of business. We would have been gone a long time ago. But they do work. And I think we get so bogged down. I always use this example, to your point, Cheryl, about using it as the easy button. When was the last time anything any of us did, retail, buying right now for Christmas, that you got an email and said, I'm going to buy right now off that email? But we expect a student to do that in higher education. It's not going to happen. What are you doing to get in front of them and then physically put them in front of another person, right? And then that high touch, high engagement, human to human interaction is more important now than ever.
And I think
and John, the question around identity is so connected to all of this, right? So is a prospective student going to respond really positively to the type of interaction that your firm is offering in the absence of bringing a really discernible brand into the market, having a presence on places like TikTok and Instagram, being where the kids are, so to speak, and actually bringing that identity to life? Probably not, right? That you've got to be able to do both in order for it to work.
I'm so glad you said that, Dave, because we always say, and I've said this with all of our partners, and we have a few College App, Acadium, go down the line, right? Software needs service, and service absolutely needs software. But when you put them together, when you identify adult learners with an intent to enroll, and then you digitally market on that group, and that spits out an inquiry, you can't sit on the inquiry, and you can't text the inquiry, and you can't email the inquiry. Call them and text and do all of it. But that high touch, that last piece has to be there, right? All these people in admissions are really talented. Let them do what they're really talented. And to Cheryl's point, don't bog them down with things that stop them from the ultimate mission. And the mission is to educate, right? And you got to get them in the door to do that.
Yeah, and the automation can be so powerful because, you know, in the end, if you're able to do all those things, track it, measure it, and make sense of it so that you can make better decisions with your staff and your resources, I mean, that's the end objective, right?
Yep.
No, I agree with you guys, right? At the end of the day, it's all about student experience, right? How are we improving student experience? Bogged down, to Cheryl's point, bogged down with emails, bogged down with text messages. That's part of outreach. That's part of a contact strategy. But that does very little to impact student experience, right? It's about that actual interaction with that representative, that advisor, that's going to improve that student experience. And at the end of the day, I feel like we have a little bit of a theme here as we talk about. They're looking for that immediate gratification, the students are. They're looking for the sense of belonging, right? They're only going to get that realistically through a live person. So let's make everybody's lives easier to give them what they want, which is contact with somebody, right? As I know we've all had that. We call someplace, we get an operator. I don't want to talk to an operator. I want to talk to a person, a real person, right? Give me some interaction. So I totally get that. And those are all great points. So I think this is a good segue for us to go into our next poll, so we can kind of get a little bit of feedback from our attendees here. So as we've talked about technology and automations, which technology or tool has been most effective in improving student enrollment experience at your institutions? Would it be virtual tours, online application platforms, chatbots for inquiries, or maybe something else that we didn't mention? So I'll give you guys 60 seconds to go ahead and answer this question here, and we'll go on. We'll move on to our next question here. All right, let's see what the poll spit out for us. So it looks like the biggest positive impact that we've had this past year has been online application platforms from 60% of our attendees. Coming in second was other. We'd love to know what that other is. Feel free to put it in the chat. And then coming last, tied for last, is chatbots and virtual campus tours, which are all different types of strategies that we might be able to employ. So I guess my next question for our panelists here is, when we look at strategies, and you guys are all involved in different parts of the space, whether, you know, it's from the marketing side, you know, OPM, working, you know, with a platform, a CRM like ours. So have you guys seen any strategies yourselves over this last year that have helped optimize the overall recruitment process or even the student experience process?
I'm trying, you know, as you were asking that question, there's a company, and their name's going to escape me right now, so I'll look it up. But they're doing virtual tours, and they're winning like crazy. And they started obviously going like crazy, and tremendous growth during the pandemic. And quite frankly, I wanted to reach out to them and partner with them because, again, software needs service, right? So when those students are going through that, who's the next line of defense to reach out to them? But those virtual tours now are more important than ever. And I think, you know, I know the trend is, because again, software and service, like we just had a school in New England say, how can you help us get students to our next on-campus visit day? And that's the goal. How many people can we physically get to campus, right? Because we win when students come to campus, but the virtual tour, and the name's going to escape me, has played a major part for sure.
We partner with a company called Campus VR that has VR headsets that they use for campus tours, but also for recruiting of athletes. And so they ship out the headset, and there's millions of VR headsets, out in students' hands right now. So they can send a video clip, they put it on, they actually are walking through the student union. They're walking in through labs and things like that. So it's actually a live virtual tour, so to speak, and it allows for students to see more campuses than they would if they had to physically travel to those campuses. Some of them show, what the dorm rooms look like in certain areas and things like that. Of course, they have to go in and clean them all up first, right? Because if the students are living in there, they're probably not the cleanest at that time. But the other thing is just making sure that your outreach marketing and the brand comes through to that student. If you can include as much of what it looks like for life on campus, because that's what students are looking for. The students are looking for, if I'm going to be on campus, I want to know who else is there, what it looks like. They so many of them are so used to digital and virtual experiences. I think the more of that you can embed into your outreach, the better off you're going to be.
Cheryl, I think you make a great point. I mean, one of the things we're seeing on the marketing side is utilization of user-generated content on social platforms is so much more effective. And it's for that exact reason, which is prospective students are seeking out what it would be like to experience your institution, and they're very, very comfortable getting immersed in somebody who's like them through a social platform, and getting that same feeling that I got, 30 plus years ago when I walked onto a college campus. And I'll never forget, I went to the University of Richmond, and I went on a tour there. It was a beautiful day. I'll never forget the feeling I had when I was on that tour. And I'm like, I can see this is where I think I want to go, right? And I couldn't explain it so much at the time, but I'll never forget the feeling. I think it just happens in different ways now.
And I think humans haven't changed that much, right? Over the the last however many years. And it's important to know enough about them to understand what's important to them. And so keep it as personal as you can get it, because otherwise it's just noise and they move past it.
A family friend's son is being recruited as a Division I baseball player right now. Big old 6'6" lefty. And I was meeting with both parents just to go over some of the nuances of higher education with them. And I said, the number one question I would ask your son is, every time you step foot onto a campus, how does he feel when he's on the campus? The feel will let him know whether he feels right, that like whether it's the right fit. And I said, because you're going to know immediately in a conversation with a coach, do you like the coach? But how you feel on that campus is going to be your decision maker. That's usually it. It's sure the program is absolutely, I want to get into this academic program. I want to get into that. And in his case, baseball and academics are really important to him. But how do you feel when you're stepping foot on there? And I'll never forget, we thought a state school in Ohio was going to be his favorite. And he came back and said, I just didn't feel right there. and that's, that gives you an idea of, like, I love the idea. I've never heard of virtual VR, or is it campus VR? Campus VR.
Campus VR.
Yeah, campus VR. I love that idea of, hey, if you can't fly from Texas to Rhode Island to come visit us on campus, we'll bring Rhode Island to you. That's pretty neat.
And I think, just to kind of piggyback on what you guys are saying when we talk about that sense of belonging, that feel, I'll never forget. I was was running a school in Northern California a few years ago. It was pre-pandemic. And I like to say that we were in College Row, right? And we had about 6 other competitors, literally within walking distance of one another. The students could hop from one school to another. And I made it a habit. Every student that signed up, I wanted to meet with them. I wanted to have a conversation with them. My biggest question to them was, hey, why'd you choose us? We're not the best priced, right? When we look at our price point, we're somewhere in the middle. This school down the road is cheaper. This school over here is a little bit more expensive. Program offerings are pretty similar, right? We have a medical assisting, they have a medical assisting. You're going to be learning the similar things. And I know you want to go visit them. Why did you choose to sign up with us over any of those 5 other competitors? And consistently, the answer was almost identical. You guys make me feel comfortable. You guys make me feel like you really care. You gave me a sense of belonging here. I can see myself at this school more than I can see myself over there. You guys weren't trying to sell me to sign up to school. You guys were just looking to make the right decision for me. And your advisor even told me if this isn't the right place for me, it's okay. He's not going to hold it against me. And I really think that when we can give that to our students, even from a distance, that's impactful. Whether they choose to sign up to that school or not, they're going to walk away with such a positive experience that they may not go to your school, but they have friends, they have family members, they have people in their circle that they know that would be more than happy to recommend your institution.
The proof of high touch, trusted brand is in online learning. That the majority of students choose an online brand if you're going online within 2 hours of their home. Not just on campus, online, 2 hours within their home, 2 hours of driving distance within their home, maybe 2.5. Think about that, right? I think it's like 85%. I mean, so now that doesn't mean, you don't live in Pennsylvania and don't go to, in fact, we have one of our employees that jumped on a team call with us last week and said, John, can you help me finish my degree? I went to the University of Arizona online, and can you help me finish my degree? And she lives on the East Coast. So she was one of the 20%, right? But the numbers say that you choose something closer, right? That doesn't mean you don't pick something else, but the numbers say that high touch, how you make me feel, to your point, Johan, it's close.
It's very impactful.
Yeah, and Johan, you raise a really critical word, which is the experience. And I think beyond just the feeling, it's, do you make it easy for them to get the information that they need, right? Do you help them or anticipate what questions they're going to have in a way that requires less work on their part, right? Do you allow them to make an informed choice when they're exploring? And as much as that is about that feeling that you're looking to create, it's also about eliminating friction from the experience in a way that makes things easy for them.
I agree. This is great stuff, guys. So I'm going to jump a little bit ahead now because I know we're about 40 minutes in, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I also want to give a few minutes for a Q&A at the end if anybody of our attendees has any questions that we would be happy to answer as a group. So let's talk a little bit about crisis management and preparedness, right? With a lot of recent challenges in this industry, how do you guys think that institutions have enhanced their crisis management and preparedness strategies, and what lessons have been learned from that?
I can jump in here, Johan. It's when you think about it, before 2019, there were a lot of institutions that didn't have much for crisis management, right? And they had to learn it really, really quickly when 2019 came and the pandemic came. And I'll try to grab this and stick it in the chat, but there's a Springer link that's When Crisis Hit Home. It's high impact, talks about high impact events. And it's having a crisis management plan that is initiated throughout your organization, not just having somebody in crisis management, but everybody knows what to do and when to do it. And the thing is that the most important thing to understand is making sure that you practice plan, right? It's what happens when something bad happens. Is everybody prepared? Think about it in the Midwest, Tornado Alley. you don't think about little kids that, they get the tornado drill and then they just calmly walk down the hall. They go sit in the area that they're supposed to sit in. And it's just part of what they do because they practice it. So that if something bad happens, everything is in its place. It's having a crisis management plan and never practicing it is where institutions will fall down. And so, and then the other comment I want to make about crisis management is you have to think about crisis management not just being a physical thing, but also a data thing. So you can have a crisis, which is all of your students' data has just been exposed to the internet, right? So that's why there's so much money being spent in both physical and data security. So that's what I'll say about that. Then I'll go find the link and I'll throw it in the chat.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, we survey each one of our students, and on the stop out student side, shockingly, and I say this because I wasn't expecting it, only 7% of our stop out students, and we're talking tens of thousands of them, close to 100,000 now, have said that the pandemic is the reason they stopped out. 7%. So, and that's across the board, community college, four-year privates, four-year publics, only 7. Now, that doesn't mean that there wasn't a crisis. So I want to make that really clear, but at least the reason why they're stopping out, and finances, shockingly, for anybody that goes to a public institution, less than 15% of students say finances, which there is a crisis of how much higher education is costing right now. We're all well aware of that. Back to the crisis management on campuses, though, I think it's to Cheryl's point, what are you doing to prepare for that if you had a breach, if you had a power outage, if you had something impact your school, like the pandemic? So a good example is I work with a small private school in Pennsylvania, and we tried to get a hold of their financial aid office for 10 days, to give their students, right? Like I'm on a foundation and we're trying to give their students money to help them through this, right? And it just blew me away. We couldn't get a response in 10 days. And the reason why is because they said, well, our voicemail doesn't go to our email. Something that simple on the technology side, right? And every other school would say, wow, how could they not? There were plenty of schools across the country that their contact software, their phone software, did not allow for them to live remotely and work remotely.
I think that's key, right? That communication tool is extremely important. If you don't have the right tool to communicate, we're now all of it, we're siloed, right? Everybody is siloed. And hey, what are you doing over there? Doing over there? Wait, I didn't know you were doing that, right? And then everybody's always constantly playing catch up, which is the challenge, right? It's important to invest in that infrastructure to ensure that you have the right communication tools to be able to get everything out, disseminate the information. And Dave, I think you were going to add something as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cheryl and John really covered this exceptionally well. I would say just in kind of bringing both of their overarching points together, biggest thing I've seen since 2019 is definitely in and around data management as a part of how you think about managing overarching crises that could occur at an institution. I think in the world that I'm in, there's an overarching communication strategy around crisis management that needs to be a part of how you think and plan in the event that anything catastrophic were to happen at the institution.
All good points. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and move us along to our third and final poll question, and then our final question for the panelists. So we can try to give a few minutes for Q&A if anybody has Q&A for us. So our third poll, which emerging trend do you believe will have the most significant impact on higher ed in 2024? Hybrid learning models, technological advances in education, increased emphasis on lifelong learning, or something else? So I'll give everybody 60 seconds to answer that, and then we will go ahead with our last question. All right, and the answers are coming in at number one, 67% of our attendees said technological advances in education, and coming in second is hybrid learning models. So that being said, Dave, John, Cheryl, you guys all have different levels of expertise in different parts of what you guys do in higher ed. What do you guys think are some emerging trends that you foresee shaping higher ed in 2024?
I think you'll see a much higher focus on the hybrid model. I think everything, back to Cheryl's point about the Gen Z population that was born during the recession of '08 and is about to help impact the demographic cliff. That population, anybody under the age of 35, quite frankly, has known nothing but high demand, on demand, when I want it, I want it now, right? Like we had some of that. I mean, of certain other generations, but really, if you're under the age of 35, it's all you've ever known. And there's one industry that you, again, are making a major investment in, and that for the most part, painting with a broad brush is not on demand, right? So whether I'm going to an Ivy League school or some other institution, I think you're going to see students want the ability that in the summer, if I want to take a course to further my education along and I can take it online and it speeds up my degree completion, then I think you're going to want to see that, right? And students are going to want to see that, and they're going to start demanding it. And I think you're going to see that trend only continue over the next 10 years of this idea of it has to be 4 years. Why does it have to be 4 years, right? You're going to start seeing that shrink a little bit more.
To John's point, the whole, why does it have to be 4 years? I think institutions need to be thinking about the careers that no one's thought of yet. I mean, there's so much around robotics. There's so much around what, self-driving cars and all of the things that are coming out from a technology standpoint that companies need the skilled workers and employees to fill those positions. And so institutions have to move quickly and have to adopt technology that allows them to do that. So a lot of like online labs and all these other things that need to be, leveraging things like virtual reality or whatever it might be to take people through that journey faster. Because again, it's about immediacy. It's about, I want to come out of college, I want to be running the company, and I need to make 6 figures, right? So that's the mentality that you're dealing with, because it is still all about immediacy and getting to that career as quickly as possible.
I mean, two things that stand out for me that are on the surface, probably seem like they're not connected, but I think they are. I think about brand and identity. I think about the schools that are developing a clear sense for who they are and who they want to be, and how that can impact a student. I think those schools are going to start to increasingly find more levels of success in a highly competitive environment. And then I think data strategy in and around how you're engaging with students has to start with understanding the student better, regardless of type. And then it's going to have to extend into understanding workforce and job pathways, right? And I think the institutions that figure out how to bring those data sets together in a way that accentuates their identity as an institution are going to win and win big in the next several years.
And if I can add, I think over the last few years, there's been a surge in a lot of ed tech companies emerging that are very disruptive to the traditional model. And when I say traditional, I don't just mean traditional higher ed. I'm talking about like your traditional for-profits as well, right? Vocational school, certificate schools, typical 7th, 10-month certificate programs. There's a lot of ed tech companies out there that folks are going to, that their pricing models are completely different. The way that they teach is completely different. And as we look at the demographics and the shift in demographics, it's really how are traditional higher ed and traditional for-profits able to keep up with that? What are you doing to pivot your model, right? Or are you doing the tried and true certificate programs that we've been doing for the last 50 or 60 years?
Yeah.
Which, to John's point, when John was talking about some old school tactics, it works. Some of the stuff, it works. But as you want to get more competitive and as you want to scale, these are some of the things that we need to be thinking about. How can I take this to the next level? How can I take this traditional medical assisting program, hypothetically, and make it a revolutionary medical assisting program? How can I innovate this? And I think, that's where we're going to next, is the innovation is going to continue. So that being said, I know we're coming in on the end of our webinar here. So I'd like to say, I'd like to give us maybe 3-4 minutes for any questions that we can answer from our attendees. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, please feel free, put it in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer any. And if we don't have any, that's totally fine. Not a problem. So I will go ahead, give it 60 seconds. If anybody has any questions they want to plug in, feel free to plug in. If not, we'll go ahead and we'll wrap up our webinar. That's what I was waiting for, Dave. Dave just plugged his podcast. I forgot to bring that up earlier. Thank you for plugging your podcast.
No, all good. It's good to get a plug in, but even more critically, John had mentioned Unity Environmental University and Dr. Melicory. What he has done at that institution is incredible. The interview that I was fortunate enough to have with him a couple of weeks back, I think would be valuable for anybody in higher education, but certainly for institutions that are trying to think in more progressive ways.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Dave. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions in our chat here. So I definitely would like to thank, first of all of our attendees for joining us for this 2023 in review, changes in higher education. I'd like to thank our panelists, Dave, John, Cheryl. Thank you guys so much for taking an hour out of your day, giving us some thoughts, giving us some feedback. Oh, wait, we do have one question in the chat from Lisa, but I don't see it here.
He asked, how can we get a certificate for attending? I'll leave that up to you, Johan.
You know what? I'll leave that up to our organizer, Reshma. Reshma, she'll get right on. No, I'm kidding.
Question from Lisa. How can I work with Complete You and John Meyer? I can't believe she asked it, John.
Well, yeah. that's an easy one. It's John at completeyoueducation.com. Yeah, we don't mind sharing that. No, and I Johan, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I think that there's no doubt that the technology play to allow schools to scale. What's been neat is seeing small schools realizing they can play in the space. You don't have to be Western Governors. People forget Southern New Hampshire University had 3,000 students on campus, and now they have 180,000 online. It can be done if you believe and you want to triple down on your brand and you find your niche, you'll win.
Those are great points. Great points. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Thank you for taking the time out of the webinar. I wish everybody a great rest of their Tuesday. Take care and let's have fun.
Thanks, Johan.
Thanks, John. Thanks,
Really
David.
enjoyed it. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yeah, bye-bye.